Wow. Atari 50. You know, it's pretty surreal knowing that Atari's been around for half a century now. But I have a confession to make. I was never an Atari guy.
I know, shocker. I'm in the process of building my own wall of video games, and yet I still refuse to buy the Atari 2600 just so I can play Spider-Man.
Yeah, this guy doesn't have much going for it these days. You gotta give Atari some credit. They're the one who not only kickstarted the video game industry with arcades and home consoles, but damn near killing it at the same time. However, when competition started to build, when companies like Sega and Nintendo came into the scene, Atari seems to be completely buried throughout history in my view. Let's be real here. As far as home consoles go, the Nintendo Entertainment System alone has more iconic titles that's still relevant to this day. The Atari had math. That's not to say Atari didn't have its own charm, however.
Being a retro gamer in general is looking back upon these classics that predates my time period, popping in the original cartridge with original controllers to truly get the authenticity of these experiences, which is something you don't really get with most alternatives when you boil down to it. Almost any gamers I know have some kind of attachment with iconic systems like the N64, Sega Genesis, or hell, even the GameCube for all I care. Because some of these classics can hold the test of time or carry hidden gems that define the console. I never hear anyone talk about the Atari unless you started a YouTube channel in the late 2000s. Maybe some classic arcades you find at arcade bars, but everything else? God no. It's in this primitive era of gaming that nobody really wants to think about unless you were really serious about it. Even then, investing in getting your own console with the cables, controllers, and games that only look like this doesn't really make this a feasible hobby for everyone. I've had my fair share of Atari games through emulation, for instance, but that wasn't gonna light the world on fire for me. Now, despite what I just said, there are official alternatives that could better replicate those experiences. Personally, the closest Atari experience I ever got came from the plug-and-play game. Ah yes, every 2000s kid grew up with at least one of these bad boys, and it's exactly what it sets out to do. You plug the controller into your TV with a handful of AA batteries, and boom, cheap video games. The Atari one I have here is a recreation of the iconic 2600 controller, now with the ability to play Adventure without the need of the original game console or cartridge. You do get a few arcade ports as well, but Adventure has always been a peculiar game that stood out to me at a young age. Your character is just a dot, roaming around a complex maze to find keys in the open pathways, all while avoiding...
Was that a duck?
It's simple, but imagining myself being in the right mood with a CRT and the original controller, it's one of the more atmospheric experiences you can get from the Atari 2600. I do love playing action-adventure games even today, and Adventure was, well, one of the very first adventure games, which I find fascinating. Although, most people these days aren't really going out of their way to find plug-and-plays that only use composite video out on their giant 4K TVs. Worst case scenario, Atari can always try to keep themselves relevant by releasing video game compilations. Compilations has been a broader topic to cover in general with varying qualities. There are releases that offers a complete experience with all titles and DLCs included, some putting in lots of passion into the presentation with great emulations, and others that does the absolute bare minimum.
Case in point, Atari Flashback Classics. I remember one year for Christmas, I want to say back in 2016, my step-sibling's grandmother bought this as a Christmas gift for them. I never saw them play these games. That just established how old everyone is. So I took the opportunity to try it out myself, and holy shit, this is raw.
Surprisingly, this was made by At Games. They normally produce the cheapest mini consoles you can find at your Walmart's toy section, and this is not terrible. Presentation is pretty generic, emulation is good, although I don't know how anyone could fuck up emulating 2600 games these days. they're just Atari 2600 games. They do have 5 arcade releases, but still, just Atari 2600 games. Also, why was this split into 2 volumes, with a third one releasing 2 years later? At least with the Switch release, that combines all 150 games into one package. Now, on paper, 150 Atari games total retailing for $40, which you can definitely find for half that price. That's a video game deal of a lifetime. Then again, this is where the quantity over quality comes into play here. There's a reason why something like the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, for example, only has 20 games. But they're the 20 games that define the console and something everyone should play. The Atari Flashback Classics is all the games nobody wants to buy at their local retro game store. This was not going to change anyone's mind about Atari unless you have some kind of nostalgia for them. Flash forward to today, well, Atari is still around doing some random things. We got the Atari VCS as far as I'm concerned, and that's all I really have to say about it. So what does Atari set out to do to celebrate 50 years of existence? We got another Atari compilation. Shocker. However, this isn't your typical compilation, as Atari 50 is actually developed by Digital Eclipse. In my opinion, they make some of the best video game compilations out there. I mean, they just released the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collections a few months prior to pair alongside the new Ninja Turtles game, Shredder's Revenge. 13 classic games with superb emulation and a treasure trove full of bonus content, including never-before-seen documentations. Digital Eclipse puts in the love and care needed for these projects, so when I heard they were making an Atari compilation that supposedly covers their entire history, I was more than eager to check it out for myself.
So, here I am, a non-Atari gamer with his own Switch copy that I got for $30. If this can be sold for the same price as Sonic Frontiers for Black Friday, then I got nothing to lose at this rate. That's how you make a title screen. Which makes this gold cover art a lot more lame in comparison.
This is Atari 50, and right off the bat we're presented with 5 historic chapters to go through. Or if you want to get down and dirty with it, you can go through the entire games list on a separate menu. Over 100 Atari games are included. Now, we're probably reaching Flashback Classics level here, but while a good handful of them are 2600 games, we do have access to all arcades, consoles, handheld, and computers they've developed throughout history. Although, to be perfectly honest, the real fun comes from the historic timeline itself. Each chapter presents a horizontal time chart. Scrolling through presents an arcade title they released in order or highlights with Atari's progression from the very beginning. For example, we have Pong. You could take a good look at the arcade itself, scroll down to find promotional flyers, behind the scenes, some brand new documentary video segments made specifically for this release. Plus, while you're at it, you might as well boot up the game right from the menu to see for yourself.
Video games has come a long way since. I really love the presentation. It almost feels like a mini campaign, scrolling through the timeline and checking all the marks to cover everything. I don't think there's ever been a compilation quite like this before. Going through Atari 50 actually gives me incentive to try out these games I never thought I would, some of which I never even heard of before.
Like Lunar Lander, Atari's very first vector graphics arcade release. It's simple to play, all you have to do is line up your pod without crashing, but holy crap, this is insanely difficult and addictive. After playing that, I can check out whatever extra content lies below, like some promotional flyers and Atari Reimagined series? Brand new recreations of classic titles that Digital Eclipse specifically developed for this compilation? Vector Sector being a twin-stick shooter mashing together all my favorite vector graphics arcades into one seamless high-score based game?
That's awesome.
They didn't even have to include this, but sure, I'll gladly take this. Which reminds me, you can check out both versions of Asteroids. featuring high quality scan of the original artwork used. Centipede having never before seen design documents, I have no clue what the hell this iRobot arcade game, but hey, it's the first arcade that produced 3D shaded polygonal graphics.
Ah, so now I understand the significance of playing this game.
Atari 2600 is definitely the most prominent platform with a bigger game list, which isn't surprising since it's definitely where Atari peaked in the gaming industry. At least with the second and third chapters highlight the games that truly define the platform while also showing all the knickknacks and bizarre controllers. More documentary segments sharing the cultural impact of the console. I was not expecting Tim Schafer of all people to talk about how impactful and weird Adventure actually is, but I'm all for it.
I really loved that experience of somewhat confused experience, and I feel like that's actually something I love still in games now. When there's that moment of like, what the? Where you just get games can do that. They can just surprise you and they can make you feel really bewildered. And then as you slowly figure out how they work, that's part of the pleasure of them. I think is that not knowing what to expect in them. So that moment of being surprised by Adventure has really stuck with me.
You can find and read the entire comic book for both Sword Quest and Yars of Revenge, which I never even heard about beforehand. Speaking of which, even Yars of Revenge got remastered with the original source code intact. And Haunted Mansion just flat out got rebooted with voxel graphics, which again, they did not have to put in this much effort to begin with. But it's so damn cool! Why am I still playing the original 2600 games? You also get a taste of Atari's PC lineup, with some notable games to check out. Nothing mind-blowing to me personally, but once again, shows how far we've truly come. Finally, the last chapter features Atari's final effort throughout the 90s, most notable being Ninja Golf.
I
Atari Lynx and Atari Jaguar, which I gotta say, wow. Let's take a moment to admire the commitment Digital Eclipse has to bring over Lynx and Jaguar games for the first time ever.
Although a lot of these aren't bangers by any means, which kind of shows the downfall of Atari as a video game developer and manufacturer. But hold those thoughts. Trevor, McFur, and the Crescent Galaxy? What kind of game is this?
A mediocre horizontal shooter.
That's one sexy box art, though. Atari Karts? A mascot kart racer that's straight up Super Mario Kart on the Atari Jaguar, but starring Benson Bear?
Benson Bear. Huh? You know, from Crystal Castle. You can play in the Atari 50 compilation.
Oh, right. How about Malibu Bikini Volleyball? Okay, Tempest 2000. It's obviously a Tempest game, but it's easily the best game you can play on the Jaguar. At least I can sleep at night knowing that it's not Trevor McFur.
Oh, and their last games for both platforms is a Virtua Fighter ripoff on the Jaguar, and a 2-game pack of the same arcade titles that's been ported to pretty much all Atari platforms by now. And that's the gist of Atari's history. Surprisingly, going through all the chapters unlocks you a 2600 game for you to play. Well, at least I tried it. There's a few more unlockable 2600 games as well, but I currently have no clue how to unlock it at the top of my head. Probably a bunch of Easter eggs I definitely missed, which I'm sure most hardcore Atari fans can get into. Or maybe I should play more of the Reimagined series.
Even if I'm not much of an Atari fan, and not all games are great to begin with, but I appreciate how this compilation exists. Atari 50 gave me incentive to go through the entire game list while offering documentations that probably never seen before. This isn't just a video game compilation, while some may be having some bonus content hidden at the back end of the menu. This is an interactive museum, putting Atari's history front and center while including games that complement each other's context.
There are some odd omissions to point out. Surprisingly, no tape mode was included. There's a handful of Switch games that allows the ability to rotate the tablet vertically to fill the entire screen, which would have been useful for arcade titles included in Atari 50. I hope there could be some kind of patch to bring the screen rotation in, but either way, I'll live. Just a missed opportunity. Now, if it weren't for licensing issues, there's definitely some third-party titles that would have been fun to include, like Pitfall on the Atari 2600, or Aliens vs. Predator on the Jaguar would have been nice.
All in all, everything that you can gain from Atari from the very beginning is preserved in this neat little package, making this one of the best video game compilations ever made that I think many gamers would appreciate. This is one made by pure love and passion, made by legitimate Atari diehards. With that being said, Digital Eclipse also developed the Spider-Man plug-and-play, with the controller also resembling the Atari 2600 controller. I knew these guys would come into play here, but I never thought they would come full circle like this.